So, what's the first thing that comes to mind when you think of water? Is it that it's a transporter? It likes to flock to minerals, pick them up, deposit them somewhere else. It can even be seen as a transporter in the way that the ocean allows lots of travel across it. Until it moves through our bodies, and it loves to be in a state of flow. That's its ideal form. Becoming something different, it's adventurous, isn't it? Sometimes it wants to be in the Antarctica, experiencing the state of ice, and other times it wants to feel the sort of exhilaration of going over a waterfall, plunging down into that pool. As long as it's moving, it's healthy. If you see any kind of stagnant puddle or lake or something, you don't really want to swim or drink in that, do you? It's like, it looks a bit filthy because it's not moving. Always wants to be moving into different states. So if we check in on what water is feeling in a modern day society, especially in somewhere like a city, what is water doing there? It's in right angles, isn't it? In pipes, It feels hemmed in. It's reflective of what many of the humans and animals in the city are feeling also. Rather than have picked up minerals along its, journey through eternity, it's now picking up toxins. And so what many people flush down the loo is full of like pharmaceutical products as well. So metformin and contraceptive pills, they don't get filtered out anywhere. They just go through the water cycle and end up in our tap water again. So the collective then is intaking those same products that other people have taken. As an example of none of us are truly separate, everything is connected. What one person does 500 miles away ultimately affects us as a ripple effect. So, okay, rather than be all doom and gloom about that, because even if you drink bottled water, which I do, I avoid tap water, that's going to be contaminated somewhat by the collective's activities in planet Earth. But planet Earth isn't just one solid material state. It's basically a timelines of probabilities and multiple realities going on at once. Okay, so if that's the case, and we can effectively change the state of water and the health of it with our minds and with our state of consciousness and with our vibration to match our vibration. So ultimately, we all have our own responsibility and subjective imprint on water, if that makes any sense. I tried to do what I did. I did an experiment too, actually. So I did the really cool experiment first, which is more in line to like the way I think. But I'm going to talk about the second experiment first. That second experiment, now I'm not a scientist in any way, and I do things in a really basic layman thing, like the way you can just do something simple in your living room, your kitchen. I'd seen clips over the past couple of years of experts and holistic experts as well, like very, they've been really into it for decades, so they know what they're doing. They sort of had petri dishes, managed to freeze water in such a way, in such a state that the water expressed geometrical patterns depending on where it had come from. So healthier states of water, say that you'd collect from a spring, nature sort of had like hexagonal, almost snowflake pattern to it when it was frozen. And if they took tap water, it would be really chaotic, like angry, kind of feeling that hemmed in, almost right angular, like it's trying to express, my journey has been through loads of pipes and I've been like degraded by all these pollutants. That's kind of like the picture of what it did. But some people have gone a step further on from that and managed to get water to express artistic impressions of a tree and a sailboat. So water is so much more than a transporter. It is memory. It holds information about where it's been. So it's experienced as a droplet in the ocean. It's experienced a boat, isn't it? And it wants to, like consciousness in human form, it wants to experience things. That's the point of being, I guess, in the material world. So how do we get it in line with I guess, high vibrational states when others around us don't really care about that stuff. They're like, whatever. People who drink tap water, mainly they're not drinking it straight from the tap. They'll be like, oh, I don't like water. They'll have it with like squash or tea to disguise the taste because it's disgusting. If you have water from a spring or a good bottled water, it's so refreshing, isn't it? So we can really, our instincts are telling us what's good water and what's bad water. But modern society, I think, is disguising the bad taste in the toxic water. But we don't want to get down in the dumps about it, and we don't want to like discard what I'm saying is toxic water away, because everything is one, everything is the same. How do we change the memory essentially of that water? And that's all we have to do. It's not about filtering it through charcoal or doing like a million expensive things. We can change the state of water with our mind, and I've seen a few other people do this as well. This is where I got the idea from, that they could essentially, if putting the water in the petri dish again, rather than compare tap water with spring water, they just got any old water and imprinted love. When they imprinted love into it, like that symmetrical, lovely pattern came back. It came back to life because it was on the frequency of love. And if one water in the petri dish was frozen and it was subjected to lower frequencies, I don't know, hate, anger, neglect, it would do that same jagged patterns as we see in like the tap water. So yeah, I did a very basic experiment here with like no controls. It's not like in any way a proper scientific experiment. I'm not a scientist. I'm just a curious person. And so I did Fiji water. If you think of that, think of like it comes from a volcano. And I did a high pH water, supposedly. And tap water. I went outside on my balcony and retrieved some water, like rainwater that had been in a plant pot, and it's like got soil and all that stuff in it. Seen sunlight at least every day for the past few weeks. Put that in a petri dish. What was the last one? Glass bottled water. So the Fiji and the alkaline pH are both plastic. So I decided to put a little tiny layer of water on both, on each of these petri dishes, and then I put them in the freezer at the same time. I waited about 22 minutes for them all to freeze. You don't want them to over freeze into just a block of ice. You want to get that state where the liquid is really like just crystallizing into solid form, and there is where you'll see the pattern that comes up. So yeah, I waited, and yeah, it was a bit of a shit experiment really, because I expected to maybe see more symmetry and maybe more of like a geometrical pattern in the outdoor water, and maybe the Fiji water and the alkaline water, the healthier states of water, as opposed to the tap water. But they're all pretty much the same, which is interesting if we reflect on what I was talking about earlier, and the fact that, well, everything as a collective is the same if it's on the same frequency. So even though these waters were from different sources, supposedly some of them healthier sources, from my perspective at least, they were all the same. So yeah, nothing conclusive from that experiment, but that was my second experiment. I already knew the power of water before it. The first experiment I did was the one where consciousness could affect the water. And I labelled one petri dish with love, one petri dish with the label ignored, and that one had a little chip on the glass thing as well, like so it had been thrown about. I put the ignored petri dish straight in the freezer. No love or care towards it whatsoever. And then I had a third Petri dish, which I labelled blood. I put a little bit of my blood in it, not injured blood, female blood, it's new moon. Put that in it. I don't know if anyone has done that in the history of the world. I just thought, why not? Let's see what happens. And I left them in the freezer for, again, about sort of 20 to 25 minutes. That was, more of what I wanted to see. So with the blood one, that was really interesting, that one, the droplet of blood from my body. If you see now, it's come up in the shape of a moon. And none of the others look anything like that. But I've discussed or spoken about in previous video how my cycles, at least, are completely in sync with the moon. So that's what the water picked up on. The information of my blood went into it, and the consciousness of my blood expressed itself as a moon. I was like, wow, okay, that's cool. Because the mind and consciousness overrides everything. It overrides every single scientific experiment that's ever been done. The will of the person affects the results every single time. This is alchemy, isn't it? It's magic. And so the blood one was really my favourite one, I think. I thought that was really cool. I didn't expect it to, I didn't know what it was going to do. But the moon was almost the perfect thing it could have expressed in such a simple way. And the ignored one was, very telltale, really jagged, disrupted pattern, more so than any of the tap water. You can like the bottled water experiment I did, which we can see that as a control, I guess. Really, really dysregulated pattern on that one, because I actively ignored it and I neglected it as compared to the other ones. And then the love one was the most interesting. So I tried to do something dimensionally fancy with that love one, which in hindsight wasn't the correct thing to do. But anyway, I tried to go into a different state of consciousness, which I can do on my own easily. And I tried to record it. But the second, almost even less than that, and the millisecond of me attempting to do that, I was holding the Petri dish with love in my hand. And essentially, if I raised my frequency to such a height, that water would take it on. And that was what I was trying to do. The second I attempted to do it, I heard a car door. In my car park outside, I can see sort of my balcony overlooks the car park and the communal green space. And it was my neighbours had just brought back their newborn baby, and the parents were hugging each other, cuddling each other as the baby was still thumbs up. Okay, right. So outside, they were it was such a lovely moment to witness. Really lovely. But I was trying to be like, I gotta go back to this fancy dimensional thing I was trying to do. So I was trying to block out what I was seeing out there. It's such a sweet moment. And I was like, stop thinking about it. But I couldn't. I was trying to, it was still like imprinting in my reality. Anyway, I was a bit annoyed, but I was like, okay, whatever. I tried. I felt like I was in quite a joyful, happy state. It was representative of love. I put it in the freezer. And then I took it out 20 to 25 minutes later, and and then there was like two, it was different to the other ones. There were like two characters almost, But it was like it was in the same position as these two parents going in to embrace each other for a hug. But I think the detail in the picture, it's obviously quite abstract if you think of it that way. The detail in that picture they could be just seen as two blobs, but to me it was symbolically representative of what I was looking at outside, two parents coming together to hug, but me trying to not look at it. So I couldn't, I guess, almost get like every single detail of like what they were wearing, what their faces looked like, because I was trying to pull myself away from it. So I was like, okay, well that's cool. And I guess this is how reality works. It's got nothing to do with the water. It's got nothing to do with the petri dish. It's got nothing to do with the freezing. But look what happened when I concentrated on, okay, I'm going to experience love. The second I did that, my reality put up a picture of love in my car park. Car park had been empty all day, but that second it did it. And that's how much power we have over our external reality. What we can call in, what we choose to see. And so then later that afternoon, I tried to do the same. I said, I've got to do this. Okay. I got distracted earlier. Let's see what I can do if I do that dimensionally fancy way of raising frequency. What will happen to that water? My son was in his room playing, and he'd been there for half an hour. Playing really nicely. And again, the millisecond that I tried to raise my frequency, attempted to go into that state, and I tried to do it on camera as well, he runs in and gives me a hug. I'm like, that's lovely, but like still, I was trying to do this thing. I've been distracted again. And he then, I was like, just give me 5 minutes. But he wouldn't leave me alone. He couldn't find the notepad he wanted. We had to look for the correct notepad. And then I got hugely distracted again. And I wasn't really, there wasn't the time or space to do this fancy thing I wanted to do. So I was like, I'll just leave it. And I put that petri dish that had experienced that, my son coming in, I put that into the freezer just to see what happens with that one. And again, this is different from the rest as well. If you look at it, it's got two hands, sort of, when I first saw it, it was like two stops. Like that's what you say. That's what you do when you want to stop something or someone, isn't it? Two stops. And one of them, and it was in exactly the same position. I was sitting on this chair. My son was here. And I'm the big hand and he's the small hand. If you see what the water did to express that. And what I read from that, because I like to read everything from everything, I think there's a message in every single tiny thing about our reality. Nothing is an accident, ever. And what I read from it was essentially I was being blocked from doing anything dimensionally fancy on these videos. I immediately got it. I understood. I wasn't meant to do that. Because if you do that, no one, very, very, very few people may be able to resonate with that. And I am not here to bathe others in higher frequencies. We're all here essentially to do it ourselves. No one can do it for me either. We have to all learn, if we choose to, if we want to go into those higher dimensions and frequencies, to do it solely ourselves. Part of the issue and the blocks that we all experience is that we want someone else to do it for us. And I think there has to be examples and inspiration out there, which I think is what I am doing. But I can't essentially give other people my frequencies. That's what I learned from this experiment. So, and in both love circumstances, my 3D world depicted it. What more, love do you want than two parents cuddling each other with their newborn baby in the car? That was a moment of love in 3D reality. And nothing else beats like a mother and a son bond, son running in and giving me a cuddle just out of nowhere for no reason. That was a depiction of love. Him blocking me from doing the fancy stuff was a act of love as well. So really the Petri dish did represent so clearly to me what love was in those moments in time. And that's what life's about. It's all different, it's all subjective, all going for different experiences. And so what would come up for a scientist is going to be different for what comes up for me, because we're all impressing on the water differently.